The stars above the galaxy shimmered faintly, but on this night they seemed to tremble. A cold wind whispered through the void, carrying voices that were not human, voices of chaos, murmuring ancient prophecies, echoing the fate of an angel yet to fall. In the heart of this darkness, Sanguinius, the angelic Primarch, stood upon the edge of a desolate world, his wings folding with grace, his golden armor catching the dim starlight. Every movement radiated both majesty and melancholy, for even angels could not escape the shadows that clung to the galaxy. He was beauty in a sea of monsters, light against an endless night, yet somewhere deep within, a premonition of death flickered like a candle in a storm. The universe held its breath, knowing that the story of this angel would be one of both awe and heartbreak. Beneath him stretched a world ravaged by war, scarred by fire, and haunted by creatures that should not exist. The air shimmered with heat and the faint, metallic scent of blood. A warning whispered to all who dared tread upon the scarred lands. Mutants, warped by famine and radiation, slithered and crawled, eyes glinting with hunger and fear. Yet these abominations, born of suffering, dared not approach him closely. His presence alone commanded a reverent terror. Sanguinius' gaze swept over the horizon, seeing not just the horrors before him, but the potential for redemption. Even in this forsaken place, he felt the weight of responsibility, a guardian to those who could not protect themselves, a light against the encroaching darkness that sought to consume all. From the far reaches of space, faint echoes of war drums seemed to vibrate in his very bones, resonating with the rhythm of destiny. It was here, amidst the silence of doom, that Sanguinius's heart pulsed with both courage and sorrow. Memories of battles past, victories won at terrible cost, and the faces of those he had lost danced in his mind like flickering shadows. He knew his path would not be one of glory alone. It was a journey paved with sacrifice, and the toll of leadership weighed upon his soul. Whispers of the future teased him, visions of fire, blood, and an enemy whose power was as boundless as the void itself. Yet even facing such premonitions, Sanguinius's eyes burned with resolve. He was the Emperor's angel, a being of hope in a galaxy teetering on the brink of annihilation. In the distant stars, a subtle shimmer heralded the approach of forces beyond mortal comprehension. The psychic winds carried warnings of treachery, chaos, and the ultimate confrontation yet to come. Sanguinius felt the stirrings within his own soul, a mixture of fear and determination, love for his sons, and dread for the darkness that awaited him. His wings, a symbol of his divinity and fragility, twitched as if aware of the battles ahead. In the void around him, shadows seemed to twist, forming monstrous silhouettes that vanished when looked at directly. Yet their whispers lingered, reminding him that death is never far from the righteous. This moment was a fragile calm before the storm, a prelude to horror and heroism interwoven. And so, standing alone upon the edge of a dying world, Sanguinius gazed into the abyss, the galaxy reflected in his eyes. He knew his fate was sealed, written in the blood of countless stars. Yet even as whispers of chaos clawed at the edges of his mind, he lifted his head, letting the wind flow through his wings, a silent defiance against the inevitable. The galaxy may tremble, enemies may rise, and darkness may consume, But in that fleeting moment, he was the perfect embodiment of hope, courage, and tragedy. And though his end would be marked in sorrow, his legend would burn brighter than the stars themselves, an eternal light against the encroaching shadow. The pale suns of Baal barely pierced the choking haze that blanketed its scarred deserts. Sandstorms, tinged red with the remnants of iron-rich dust, roared like the cries of the fallen, swallowing everything in their path. Sanguinius descended upon this shattered world, his wings slicing through the poisoned air, feathers catching the faint glint of the dying light. Below him, the remnants of civilizations long erased by war and radiation twisted into grotesque shapes. Ruins haunted by the echoes of 1,000 tragedies. It was a planet where hope had long fled, replaced by the raw, gnawing hunger of mutants and cannibal tribes that roamed the deserts like wolves over carrion. Yet, even in this desolation, the angelic Primarch moved with purpose, his presence both a shield and a promise of salvation to those who dared cling to life. As Sanguinius's boots touched the cracked earth, the ground seemed to whisper beneath him, a chorus of unseen eyes tracking his every movement. Small creatures, malformed by the toxic storms, scuttled and hissed, sensing the otherworldly power that radiated from him. They had seen many things in their cursed lives, but none so radiant, none so terrible. Mutant raiders emerged from the ruins, skeletal faces twisted with hunger, weapons crudely fashioned from bones and metal. They lunged, snarling, but froze mid-step at the sight of him. His eyes, molten with resolve and compassion, met theirs, and for a fleeting instant, fear overcame their feral instincts. Even monsters feared him, not for the promise of death, but for the undeniable force of his will. The deserts of Baal were alive with subtle horrors that preyed upon both body and mind. Ghostly winds carried the faintest screams, remnants of those devoured by the planet itself, and shadows danced unnaturally across the crumbling terrain. Sanguinius felt the weight of these tormented souls pressing upon him, tugging at the edges of his psyche. His wings trembled with both exhaustion and determination. As he moved deeper into the wastelands, Sanguinius encountered the first signs of true corruption. Villages that had once clung stubbornly to life lay in ruins, their inhabitants either slaughtered or twisted into grotesque parodies of themselves. The blackened marks of fire and unholy rituals scarred the walls, symbols of chaos that flickered like shadows in his mind. The angelic Primarch's heart ached, for he knew that the creatures he now faced were not born of pure malice, but of despair and manipulation. Every step forward brought visions of the fallen, children with hollow eyes, mothers clutching empty wombs, and warriors who had fought bravely only to be twisted into weapons of slaughter. Yet amidst this horror, Sanguinius's determination never wavered. He became a living beacon, his radiance pushing back the darkness, however fleetingly. The mutant tribes, sensing both threat and opportunity, attacked in waves. Sanguinius moved among them like a storm incarnate, his wings a blur of golden light, his sword a flash of divine judgment. Every strike was precise, every motion purposeful. Yet there was no joy in his movements, only the grim necessity of survival. The horror of the battlefield was palpable, limbs torn, blood mingling with the sands, and cries that would haunt even the most hardened warrior. And yet, even as he fought, Sanguinius extended mercy where he could, sparing those who had been deceived, guiding the weak to safety, and whispering words of hope to the hopeless. It was in this balance of destruction and salvation that the true tragedy of the angelic Primarch revealed itself. He was a creature of light, yet he could not save everyone, and the weight of that inevitability pressed upon him like the unyielding desert sun. Amidst the carnage, visions of the future flickered in his mind, taunting him with glimpses of battles yet to come. The whispers of chaos grew louder, seeping into his thoughts, showing him twisted versions of the galaxy, of his sons succumbing to madness, of himself falling before a greater foe. The horror of these premonitions clawed at his resolve, yet he held firm, grounding himself in the present, in the lives he could still touch, the hope he could still inspire. Each village liberated, each mutant spared, each child rescued was a By the time Sanguinius reached the heart of Baal's deserts, the scale of the devastation was fully apparent. Entire landscapes had been consumed by radiation storms, skeletal remains of ancient forests now twisted into blackened spires, and rivers of blood and chemical runoff cut through the red sands. Yet, amidst this apocalyptic tableau, Sanguinius remained a figure of ethereal grace, a living contradiction of beauty and horror. He raised his gaze to the horizon, sensing the presence of greater forces yet unseen, enemies whose shadows stretched far beyond this world. The whispers in the wind now carried the weight of destiny, foretelling trials that would test not just his strength, but his very soul. And so, standing upon the ruined expanse of Baal, wings spread wide and eyes burning with unyielding determination, Sanguinius prepared himself for the trials ahead. The mutants scattered, the ruins remained silent but observant, and even the winds seemed to carry a note of reverence. The angelic Primarch was both savior and harbinger, a light in a galaxy teetering on the edge of oblivion. He would fight, he would protect, and yet, deep in the shadows of his mind, the faintest tremor of dread whispered that even his brilliance might not withstand the coming storm. The deserts of Baal had tested him, shown him the fragility of life, and yet, in this crucible of horror, Sanguinius emerged not broken, but resolute, ready to face the darkness that awaited beyond the horizon. The void of space stretched endlessly as Sanguinius lifted off from the shattered deserts of Baal, wings slicing through the low-hanging clouds of dust and ash. The distant stars shimmered like shards of light against the darkness. Yet, amidst that infinite expanse, a presence stirred, a presence older, greater, and infinitely more powerful. Sanguinius's senses tingled as though the universe itself had shifted, drawing him toward a beacon beyond comprehension. A voice whispered in his mind, not of chaos, but of authority, love, and destiny intertwined. It was the Emperor, his father, the architect of humanity's empire, reaching across the void to his lost son. The words carried weight, heavy with pride and grief, echoing through the very marrow of Sanguinius's being. The first glimpse of the Emperor was breathtaking, a figure of impossible majesty, radiance that made the stars themselves seem dim in comparison. Sanguinius felt his heart surge with a mixture of awe and fear, emotions long buried beneath years of battle and sorrow now rising to the surface. He fell to one knee, wings trembling slightly, as the Emperor extended his hand. The gesture was simple, yet monumental, bridging the chasm of time, distance, and destiny. For a moment, All the horrors Sanguinius had faced, the mutants of Baal, the endless deserts, the whispering shadows, faded into insignificance. In the presence of his father, the angelic Primarch felt both vulnerable and invincible, a paradox of emotion that only the bond between parent and child could evoke. Yet even in this reunion, shadows lingered. The Emperor's gaze carried glimpses of the future, brief flashes of terrible visions. The galaxy engulfed in war, brothers turned against one another, and a son consumed by a rage that even he could not restrain. Sanguinius's mind recoiled from these glimpses, horror clawing at the edges of his consciousness. He saw himself standing over Horus, sword raised in fury, yet a darkness twisted the scene, promising betrayal, blood, and death. The Primarch's chest tightened. The weight of prophecy pressed down upon him, heavy with inevitability. Still, he knelt, taking the Emperor's hand, letting the warmth and authority of his father's presence ground him amidst the storm of foreknowledge. The Emperor's voice, when it spoke, was both comforting and commanding, resonating deep within Sanguinius's soul. "You are the light I entrusted to this galaxy," he said, "but even light is tested by shadow. Know your purpose, Sanguinius, and carry it with courage. The path ahead is dark, yet you will face it with grace and honor." The words, though calm, carried the tremor of warning. The angelic Primarch felt the gravity of his destiny pressing on him. He was to lead, to inspire, and ultimately to sacrifice. Horror and emotion intertwined. He was a soldier forged of hope, yet destined to witness the fragility of that hope shatter before him. The reunion, magnificent and tender, was tinged with the inevitability of loss, a prelude to the trials yet to come. Sanguinius rose, his wings stretching wide as if to embrace both the stars and the enormity of his destiny. His mind, sharp yet troubled, sought understanding. "Father," he whispered, voice steady despite the tempest of visions, "I will carry the burden, but the darkness grows. I feel it in every breath, in every shadow." The Emperor's hand rested briefly upon his shoulder, a grounding force, and yet the faintest tremor in the gesture revealed a shared sorrow. Even the most powerful were not immune to grief. The bond between them, however, was undeniable, a tether across time and space, a reminder that even amidst horror, love could endure. Yet amidst this reunion, Sanguinius could not ignore the whispers creeping at the edges of his mind, the first stirrings of the black rage, a horror lurking within his sons, waiting to twist hope into despair. The visions intensified, bloodied battlefields, loyal warriors succumbing to madness, and the shadow of Horus looming over him. Horror and dread intertwined with the warmth of the reunion, creating a tension that pressed on his chest. He realized that the bond with the Emperor was both a source of strength and a reminder of vulnerability. No matter the power of his wings, no matter the purity of his heart, he could not escape the coming storm. In this moment of tender horror, the Emperor imparted guidance beyond words. He spoke of strategy, of leadership, and of the importance of holding not just armies, but hearts steady against despair. Sanguinius absorbed every syllable, his resolve hardening even as the shadow of prophecy gnawed at him. The Primarch felt a surge of emotion unlike any he had experienced. Pride, love, dread, and hope converging in a tumultuous storm. Every glance between father and son carried weight. Every movement, every whispered word seemed to echo across the stars. The universe itself seemed to acknowledge the gravity of this encounter, holding its breath for the actions of one angel against the tides of destiny. As the Emperor withdrew, leaving Sanguinius standing upon the edge of the void, a sense of both empowerment and foreboding settled upon him. He was ready to lead his legion, ready to face horrors uncountable. Yet he knew the path ahead would demand sacrifices beyond comprehension. The galaxy would test him, the enemy would strike, and the darkness would seek to consume him. And yet, even as dread and terror whispered at the edges of his consciousness, Sanguinius felt the radiant pulse of purpose within him, a light no shadow could fully extinguish. He spread his wings, lifted into the heavens, and set his gaze toward the horizon, where war, horror, and destiny awaited. Standing alone amidst the void, with the echoes of the Emperor's voice still resonating in his mind, Sanguinius realized the truth of his existence. He was both angel and weapon, protector and martyr. Horror and hope intertwined, creating a tapestry of inevitability that only the strongest heart could endure. With every beat of his wings, every step forward, he embraced both the burden and the grace of his role. The galaxy awaited its champion, and Sanguinius, angelic Primarch of the Blood Angels, would rise to meet the coming storm, aware that the future held not only victory, but also tragedy, not only honor, but also the shadow of death looming ever closer. The war-torn world of Baal became a crucible in which the angelic Primarch forged not only warriors, but legends. Sanguinius stood atop a jagged cliff, his wings unfurled against the blood-red sky, surveying the remnants of the survivors he had saved. Around him, the first recruits of the Blood Angels trained under his watchful eye, humans and warriors whose hearts burned with loyalty, courage, and awe. Each soldier mirrored his grace and strength, yet in the shadows, the first signs of the curse stirred. The black rage whispered in silent moments, twisting dreams into nightmares, a shadow that even Sanguinius could not fully erase. Despite this, he nurtured them with care, teaching them honor, courage, and the burden of hope in a galaxy that had little left to offer. The desert sands shifted beneath the rhythm of training soldiers, their movements precise, yet fierce. Sanguinius's golden armor glimmered in the dim light as he guided their strikes, corrected their forms, and inspired them to reach heights mortals could scarcely imagine. He moved among them like a beacon, the very embodiment of grace in a savage universe. Yet the horror of the past lingered. Mutant raiders, corrupted creatures, and the ghosts of Baal's ravaged cities haunted every glance, reminding both teacher and student of the fragile line between life and annihilation. Each recruit's eyes reflected both admiration and a quiet fear, sensing that the angel who led them bore the weight of a destiny heavier than the stars themselves. Even as the Blood Angels trained, the whispers of the curse grew louder. Dreams of blood, visions of fallen comrades, and fleeting glimpses of death haunted their sleep. Some awoke screaming, their hands clawing at imaginary foes, eyes wide with terror. Sanguinius moved among them in these dark hours, placing a hand upon the shoulders of the frightened, speaking words of reassurance that carried both warmth and solemnity. "Fear is a shadow," he whispered, "but we are the light that drives it back." He felt the stirrings of the black rage, even in himself, a subtle resonance within his chest, a pulse that reminded him that no matter the glory of their victories, the shadow of madness was never far behind. As the Blood Angels' strength grew, so too did their unity. Sanguinius fostered bonds among them, weaving loyalty and brotherhood into every drill, every shared meal, every moment spent under the burning suns of Baal. They were more than soldiers. They were a family, a reflection of his own compassion and valor. Yet, with every bond strengthened, a new weight pressed upon him, the curse he bore, the inevitable tragedy that would touch each of them. Horror seeped into these moments of triumph, a subtle reminder that even angels cannot shield the hearts of men from fate's cruel hand. Sanguinius, ever aware of his mortality and the fragility of his sons' minds, moved among them silently, a guardian both radiant and haunted. The first true battle came unexpectedly, a reminder that Baal's deserts were never truly silent. Mutant tribes and cannibal hordes, sensing the rise of the Blood Angels, attacked under the cover of crimson dust storms. Sanguinius led his warriors into combat, wings flashing like golden fire against the scarlet sky. Every movement was a blend of elegance and lethal precision, his sword striking with divine accuracy. Yet even amidst victory, horror was never far. The screams of the fallen, the twisted forms of enemies who had once been human, and the fleeting visions of what his sons might endure in battles yet to come, pressed upon him relentlessly. This dance of heroism and terror defined the early rise of the Blood Angels, forging them in fire, blood, and the shadow of destiny. In quiet moments between skirmishes, Sanguinius reflected on the duality of his role. He was both teacher and father, warrior and angel, protector and harbinger of inevitable tragedy. The burden of the black rage weighed upon him, whispering of madness, betrayal, and death. He knew that his sons, though fierce and loyal, would one day face horrors beyond comprehension. The emotional gravity of these reflections tempered his otherwise radiant presence, giving depth to the legend he was creating. In the eyes of his warriors, he saw hope. In his own heart, he carried the fear of loss, a shadow that only strengthened his resolve to prepare them for the darkness to come. As the chapter of their rise unfolded, the Blood Angels became more than soldiers. They became an army of angels, reflections of their Primarch's valor and grace. Sanguinius watched them soar across the dunes during training flights, wings catching the fading light, armor gleaming amidst the sandstorms. Each moment of triumph was tinged with dread, each victory a reminder of the horrors that awaited. Yet he nurtured them relentlessly, guiding them with both sternness and love, forging warriors who could withstand the temptations of chaos, the whispers of despair, and the inevitable horrors of war. The culmination of this period was both terrifying and inspiring. The Blood Angels, now a cohesive legion, faced a horde of mutated horrors in a trial by combat, unlike any before. The battlefield was a blur of blood and sand, screams and the flash of weapons. Yet Sanguinius moved like a golden tempest, directing, inspiring, and protecting his sons with a grace that seemed impossible for any being of flesh and bone. Each enemy felled, each comrade saved, was a testament to the angelic presence at the heart of their legion. Yet the horror of the battle left its mark, a reminder that even triumph carries the seeds of sorrow. And so, The Blood Angels rose under the radiant yet haunted guidance of Sanguinius. Their formation, their unity, their strength was forged in both fire and despair, a reflection of their Primarch's heart, a heart that burned with love, courage, and an ever-present shadow of foreboding. As the sons of Baal dipped below the horizon, casting the deserts into crimson twilight, Sanguinius looked upon his sons, wings unfurled, eyes blazing with pride and sorrow. He knew that this rise was only the beginning. Greater horrors awaited them, darker battles loomed on the horizon, and the weight of destiny pressed heavier than ever. Yet, in that moment, the Blood Angels were united, radiant, and ready, their angelic Primarch guiding them through a galaxy poised on the knife edge of terror and tragedy. The galaxy, though momentarily calm under the light of Sanguinius's triumphs, trembled in silence. Far beyond the sons of Baal, a shadow was taking shape, subtle yet inexorable. Horus, once the favored son of the Emperor, had begun his descent into corruption, his heart poisoned by whispers of chaos. The angelic Primarch's visions, once clear and radiant, now flickered with premonitions of blood, betrayal, and brotherhood torn asunder. In the quiet hours before battle, as Sanguinius walked among his Blood Angels, guiding them in their preparation, he could not shake the images of his brother, twisted and monstrous, standing over him in triumph while the galaxy burned. The horror of inevitability pressed upon him. The shadows of betrayal were creeping into the hearts of those he loved most. Sanguinius's dreams became restless, nights filled with fleeting images that twisted reality. He saw Horus smiling, but the smile carried no warmth, only the gleam of malice and ambition. The stars themselves seemed to darken in these visions, bleeding with crimson streaks, as if the galaxy itself mourned. In one fleeting glimpse, Sanguinius found himself on a battlefield of fire and corpses, his own sword torn from his grasp, while Horus loomed above, eyes glowing with the reflection of his inevitable doom. Each awakening left him drenched in sweat, wings trembling slightly, as the whispers of chaos and the faint stirrings of the black rage crept into his own mind. The horror of what was to come was undeniable. Even his divine presence could not shield him from the shadow of his brother's fall. The Emperor, sensing the growing corruption in Horus, reached out to Sanguinius in rare counsel. Their conversations were heavy with both love and warning. The Primarch's heart swelled with devotion, yet shrank with fear, for he knew that loyalty alone would not suffice against the dark tides that were rising. The seeds of betrayal were already sown, subtle and insidious, and the angelic Primarch could see the first flickers in the hearts of those around him. Among the Blood Angels, whispers of unrest began to surface, fueled by the psychic ripples of chaos, though none could match the devastation of Horus's corruption. Sanguinius felt the weight of the galaxy pressing upon him. He was both guardian and witness, a sentinel who could foresee tragedy, yet not prevent its inevitability. Even as the threat grew, Sanguinius's compassion endured. He trained his sons with relentless dedication, honing their skills while speaking of honor, courage, and loyalty. But in the quiet moments between drills, he allowed himself reflection and fear. Horror crept into these thoughts, a gnawing awareness that even those closest to him were vulnerable to the whispers of the dark. Dreams of betrayal haunted him, images of friends and brothers falling to chaos, of allies turning their weapons against their kin. Every heartbeat echoed the weight of these visions. Yet the angelic Primarch remained resolute. His love for his sons and his loyalty to the Emperor became a shield, though he knew it was fragile, temporary, against the inevitability that loomed beyond. As Horus's influence spread like a poison across the galaxy, Sanguinius began to sense the subtle distortions in reality itself. Communications between legions twisted with lies, stars flickered under psychic interference, and the very void seemed to groan under the weight of approaching treachery. The angelic Primarch, despite his strength and foresight, could do nothing to stop these ripples from reaching the hearts of even the most loyal warriors. The horror of helplessness gnawed at him, for he understood that betrayal is not always immediate. It festers quietly, growing in darkness until it erupts in devastation. Even the most radiant angel cannot illuminate every shadow. Sanguinius's visions became more vivid and terrifying as the seeds of betrayal took root. He saw the galaxy ablaze, worlds falling to chaos, loyal sons corrupted and twisted into instruments of slaughter. The figure of Horus loomed over him in every dream, a constant reminder that even love and brotherhood could be weaponized against the innocent. Each image etched itself into his mind, a reminder that destiny could be cruel and relentless. Yet amidst this horror, Sanguinius's resolve only deepened. He would face the coming storm with courage, even if the cost was his own life. He had always been a beacon in the darkness, and now that darkness was rising with unprecedented force. The psychological toll of knowing betrayal was inevitable weighed heavily on the angelic Primarch. He moved among his legion, guiding them, inspiring them, and masking the shadow gnawing at his soul. Every gesture of leadership, every word of encouragement carried undercurrents of urgency, a desperate attempt to prepare his sons for horrors yet unseen. Even as he maintained a facade of strength, every shadow in the corridors of his fortress whispered of Horus, growing power, and the corruption that lay in wait. The horror of foresight was its own torment, seeing the future, yet being powerless to alter the deepest currents of fate. Finally, one night, beneath the twin moons of a distant system, Sanguinius received a vision unlike any other. Horus stood atop a mountain of corpses, his armor glinting with malevolence, eyes alight with victory over those who would oppose him. The whispers of chaos called out the Primarch's name, mingling with the screams of the fallen. Sanguinius felt the pulse of dread in his chest, the forewarning of what was to come. Yet he did not flinch. His wings lifted as though in defiance, a silent declaration that even in the face of betrayal and overwhelming darkness, he would not yield. This vision became a turning point, solidifying his resolve to act, to protect his sons, and to face the horror of destiny with courage and unyielding grace. The galaxy trembled, unaware that the threads of treachery had been woven into the very fabric of its fate. Sanguinius, aware of the looming storm, prepared himself and his sons for trials that would test not only their strength, but the purity of their hearts. The seeds of betrayal had been sown, the horror of the future whispered in every shadow, and the angelic Primarch stood as the last bulwark against the darkness. His heart burned with love, courage, and a foreknowledge of tragedy, yet he embraced his role with the unwavering grace that would define his legend for all eternity. Cygnus Prime loomed ahead like a world carved from nightmares, a desolate planet of jagged cliffs and dark oceans that seemed to writhe with malice. The air shimmered with psychic resonance, thick and suffocating, carrying whispers of ancient evils that had slept for millennia. Sanguinius descended through the turbulent atmosphere, wings slicing through winds that seemed alive with menace. His eyes, radiant yet somber, scanned the horizon where the first demonic incursions had taken root. Blood angels, his sons, followed closely, their armor gleaming like spears of light against the encroaching shadow. Though in their eyes flickered fear, the subtle stirrings of the black rage, a curse that would test not only their courage, but their very sanity. From the moment they set foot on Cygnus Prime, the horror of the planet became apparent. The ground itself seemed to pulse, black veins writhing beneath the surface, whispering promises of torment. Demonic entities, bloodthirsters, and greater daemons of impossible shape emerged from the shadows, their roars echoing across barren valleys, shaking the hearts of even the bravest warriors. Sanguinius moved among his sons with grace and purpose, each step a defiance against despair. His sword, radiant and sharp, cut through the first wave of horrors with precision, yet every strike exacted a psychic toll, each death scream clawing at his mind. He felt the collective fear of his legion, the terror of sons facing creatures that should not exist, and the shadow of his own mortality pressing down like a crushing weight. The first clash was brutal and immediate. Daemons tore through the ranks of the Blood Angels, claws rending armor, wings scraping against the jagged rocks, and fire and blood mingling in the crimson light of Cygnus's dying sun. Horror and chaos intertwined as warriors fell into the black rage, their screams twisting into something inhuman, feeding the psychic presence of the enemy. Sanguinius fought at the forefront, his wings a golden blur, striking and shielding, guiding his sons even as he felt the oppressive influence of the warp pressing against his mind. Every heartbeat resonated with both courage and dread. He was the beacon, yet even the brightest light casts shadows that can consume. Among the chaos, a greater daemon emerged, Kabanda, towering and terrible, its body a grotesque amalgamation of claws, eyes, and mouths that screamed endlessly. Its psychic aura battered Sanguinius's mind, visions of death flickering before his eyes, moments from the future and the past colliding into a storm of foreboding. The angelic Primarch advanced unyielding, yet even he was wounded. Claws tore his armor, wings slashed, and blood mingled with the dust beneath his feet. Yet in that moment, he rose again, a symbol of defiance, striking Kabanda with the fury of both angel and warrior. Each blow carried not just strength, but love, sacrifice, and the weight of knowing that the battle would cost him dearly. The Blood Angels faltered under the relentless assault, some succumbing fully to the black rage, their actions frenzied and terrifying. Sanguinius moved to shield them, a living wall of protection against both horror and despair. He whispered to the maddened sons, his voice carrying authority and tenderness intertwined. Hold, even in darkness, you are the light. Remember who you are. His presence alone steadied the fractured minds of some, a fragile anchor against the overwhelming psychic storm. Yet he could not save all. Some were lost, and their screams echoed in his mind, a haunting prelude to the greater trials to come. Amidst this battlefield of nightmares, Sanguinius's mind flickered with visions of the future, battles yet to come, the rise of Horus, the betrayal, and the sacrifices that would be demanded. The horror of foresight clawed at him. He saw himself standing amidst corpses, his son's eyes wide with fear and rage, and the shadow of the enemy looming over everything he held dear. Yet even with this psychic torment, he pressed forward, knowing that hesitation would mean death for all he sought to protect. His wings bore him through the storm, each beat a defiance against despair, each swing of his sword a promise that evil would not claim this day without a price. Cabanda, sensing the resilience and fury of Sanguinius, pressed harder, psychic energy lashing across the battlefield, twisting reality and manifesting the fears of every warrior present. The angelic Primarch's wounds deepened, yet with every strike, he carved a path of salvation through the nightmare. His sons, though shaken and maddened, found courage in his defiance. Together they struck back, the brilliance of their combined fury illuminating the darkness. Yet the cost was evident. Bodies lay broken, minds fractured, and the whisper of the black rage lingered, an insidious reminder that the horrors of this planet were not merely physical, but eternal and psychic. In the final moments of the trial, Sanguinius faced Cabanda alone, the greater daemon towering, its multiple eyes burning with hatred and hunger. Every strike he delivered was measured, precise, and drenched in both fury and sorrow. The horror of the enemy, the psychic assault, and the screams of his sons pressed down on him, yet he endured. Bloodied, battered, but unbroken, Sanguinius drove the daemon back, leaving it wounded yet alive. A symbolic victory that demanded as much endurance of mind as of body. Even in triumph, the weight of horror remained. He understood that survival came at a cost, and the trials of destiny were far from over. As the sun dipped below the horizon of Cygnus Prime, painting the sky with blood and ash, Sanguinius stood amidst the ruined battlefield, wings tattered, armor scarred, his sons breathing heavily around him. The horror of the planet had tested them all, but the angelic Primarch had guided his legion through the storm of blood, despair, and madness. Yet even in this moment of fleeting victory, the shadows of the future loomed. The betrayal of Horus, the coming wars, and the sacrifices yet to be demanded. Sanguinius's eyes, golden and resolute, scanned the horizon. The trial of Cygnus Prime had forged courage, revealed weakness, and underscored the cost of hope in a galaxy poised on the knife edge of oblivion. The imperial palace loomed beneath a sky rent by fire and war, its spires battered but unbroken, a symbol of humanity's stubborn defiance against the tides of chaos. War horns blared across the battered landscape, echoing through the corridors of the fortress like the cries of 1,000 lost souls. Sanguinius descended amidst the chaos, wings slicing through smoke and flame, his golden armor gleaming despite the ruins surrounding him. The Blood Angels followed closely, their hearts beating in rhythm with their Primarchs, courage tempered with dread. The siege had begun, and the very fate of the Imperium hung by a thread woven from blood, hope, and horror. As Sanguinius reached the walls of the palace, he witnessed the full scale of the horror. Daemons crawled over battlements, their claws tearing through stone and steel, while corrupted space marines, twisted beyond recognition, slaughtered indiscriminately. The screams of dying defenders rose above the din of battle, mingling with the unholy laughter of the enemy. Yet amidst the carnage, Sanguinius moved like a beacon of hope and wrath. Every step, every strike of his blade, every beat of his wings carried the weight of his legion's loyalty and the desperate hope of a galaxy on the brink. Horror and heroism intertwined. The battlefield itself seemed to tremble under the intensity of his presence. Within the walls, Sanguinius became both shield and sword. He swept through the imperial palace, placing himself between the dying and the unholy, raising morale with a mere glance. Soldiers, weakened and terrified, found renewed strength in his presence, fighting with valor beyond their natural limits. Yet horror was never far. Possessed Marines lunged from shadowed corridors, their minds lost to chaos. And daemons erupted from the walls, as if the fortress itself had become a conduit for darkness. Sanguinius's sword flashed like sunlight through storm clouds, and with each fallen enemy, he bore witness to the suffering of his sons and comrades, absorbing their pain as if it were his own. Even amidst the cacophony of battle, Sanguinius sought moments to comfort the dying. He knelt beside those who could no longer rise, whispering words of peace and valor, their final breaths mingling with the smoke of burning halls. His compassion was a shield against despair. Yet the horror pressed in at every side, a relentless tide of screams, blood, and shadow. The black rage stirred in some of his sons, their eyes wide with terror and rage. Yet his presence steadied them, reminding them of who they were and what they fought for. The angelic Primarch bore the weight of both leadership and empathy, a rare combination that inspired awe, even as it demanded tremendous strength. The siege escalated with relentless ferocity. Massive, demonic engines of war hurled destruction across the courtyard, and the air shimmered with psychic malice. Sanguinius led counterattacks, his wings propelling him over the battlefield as he struck with precision and fury. Every enemy felled, every injured comrade shielded, and every demonic threat driven back was a testament to both his power and his compassion. Yet even as he fought, visions of the ultimate confrontation with Horus haunted him. Horror and dread mixed with courage. He knew that the true battle lay not just in the walls of the imperial palace, but in the destiny awaiting him aboard the vengeful spirit. Sanguinius's presence became a focal point for the defenders, a symbol of defiance against the relentless chaos. He moved like a storm incarnate, striking with both grace and devastation, each action inspiring his sons to greater feats of valor. Yet every victory came at a cost. The screams of the dying, the cries of the maddened, and the wails of daemons clawing through reality pressed upon him, and he bore it all with unyielding determination. The siege was a crucible, testing not only strength and strategy, but spirit and heart. Sanguinius endured, his wings battered, armor scarred, yet his resolve unbroken, a beacon against the encroaching shadow. Amidst the inferno, he carved paths of salvation for his sons, leading squads through impossible odds, shielding them from psychic assault, and inspiring them to strike with precision against the unholy. Every maneuver was calculated, yet even the most brilliant strategy could not erase the horror surrounding them. Chaos twisted reality, manifesting nightmares from the warp itself. Yet Sanguinius held his ground, his very presence stabilizing the minds and hearts of his legion. The Blood Angels, guided by his courage, repelled wave after wave of horror. But each victory bore the mark of loss, a grim reminder that even the greatest angel could not shield the innocent from suffering entirely. As the day waned, Sanguinius stood atop the shattered walls, wings spread wide, surveying the battlefield of ruin and fire. The imperial palace had survived another assault, yet the enemy's tide remained unbroken, relentless in its fury. His sons regrouped, weary yet resolute, and he reminded them with a voice both commanding and tender, "We fight not for ourselves, but for all that is sacred. Stand and let the light guide your path." The words carried through the smoke and blood, a promise and a command entwined. Horror lingered, yet courage burned brighter, fueled by the angelic Primarch who refused to yield. Even in the final hours of the siege, Sanguinius sensed the encroaching doom beyond the battlefield. The ultimate confrontation awaited him aboard the vengeful spirit, and the weight of destiny pressed heavier than ever. Yet, in these fleeting moments, he remained resolute, the embodiment of hope and heroism amidst incomprehensible horror. The siege of Terra was both trial and testament, a crucible in which courage, sacrifice, and fear were interwoven into the tapestry of legend. His wings, tattered but proud, bore him above the battlefield, a shining angel in a world consumed by fire, preparing him for the final steps of a path written in blood, glory, and inevitable tragedy. The vengeful spirit drifted through the black void, a fortress of steel and flame, carrying within it the culmination of betrayal, rage, and destiny. Its corridors, lined with the corpses of loyalists and enemies alike, echoed with the screams of the fallen and the faint, unholy whispers of chaos. Sanguinius stepped aboard, wings folded, but eyes aflame with divine purpose. Every step resonated with the weight of prophecy and the knowledge that this confrontation would decide the fate of humanity itself. Ahead, Horus waited, a twisted reflection of the brother he once knew, corrupted utterly by the seductive power of the warp. The horror of the moment pressed upon the angelic Primarch, yet he bore it with the unwavering courage that defined his legend. The first glimpse of Horus struck Sanguinius like a dagger of psychic malice. The War Master, clad in armor blackened by corruption and crackling with the energy of the warp, exuded an aura of death and chaos. His eyes, once familiar and warm, now glowed with malevolence and hatred, the bond of brotherhood shattered into shards of betrayal. Every instinct in Sanguinius's body screamed caution, yet beneath the fear burned a furnace of resolve. He remembered their shared laughter, their victories, the trust and love that had bound them. Now, facing the embodiment of corruption, that memory was both agony and motivation, a reminder of what was at stake and what might be lost forever. The duel began with a clash that shook the vengeful spirit. Swords, imbued with the strength of Primarch and War Master alike, collided, sparks flying into the corridors and across walls slick with blood and oil. The sound of metal against metal echoed through the ship like a death knell. Sanguinius moved with grace, wings propelling him into swift strikes and elegant parries. But the horror of the battle was not merely physical. Horus's blows carried psychic weight, each swing a probe into the deepest fears of Sanguinius's mind. Visions of destruction, betrayal, and the death of his sons flickered before him, threatening to overwhelm his resolve. Yet he endured, every heartbeat a testament to courage and love that even chaos could not extinguish. As they fought, the hallways of the vengeful spirit became a twisted tableau of horror and despair. Corpses littered the floor, some loyalists, some corrupted beyond recognition, their faces frozen in screams. The shadows themselves seemed to writhe and reach, feeding off the intensity of the duel, amplifying the terror of what was unfolding. Sanguinius's wings were slashed, feathers torn, yet he pressed forward, striking with a combination of precision, strength, and desperation. Each attack carried not only skill, but emotion, love for the Emperor, for his sons, for the galaxy that teetered on the brink of annihilation. Horror and sorrow mingled with resolve, creating a symphony of both tragedy and heroism. Memories of brotherhood haunted Sanguinius as he fought, each clash reminding him of what had been lost. The bond with Horus, once unbreakable, was now a weapon turned against him. Yet he refused to yield, even as his body bore wounds that would fell lesser beings. Wings shredded, armor cracked and bloodied, the angelic Primarch rose again and again, each strike a defiance against the inevitable darkness. Every move carried the weight of hope, a declaration that even in the heart of horror, light can endure. Yet the battle was more than physical. It was psychic, emotional, and existential, a struggle over the very soul of the galaxy. In the heart of the vengeful spirit, the duel reached its zenith. Sanguinius and Horus circled one another, eyes locked, breaths ragged, wings and armor torn. The air shimmered with psychic energy, the whispers of chaos pressing relentlessly, feeding both rage and despair. Sanguinius knew the outcome he faced. Prophecy, premonition, and the tides of fate had all spoken. Yet he moved with dignity, grace, and fury, striking with the knowledge that even in death, his actions could protect what remained. Each blow he delivered carved not only flesh, but destiny itself, a path for the Emperor to follow, a chance to save humanity from total annihilation. The final moment arrived in a maelstrom of horror and sacrifice. Sanguinius, bloodied and battered, wings shredded, lunged at Horus with a final surge of divine strength. Their swords clashed one last time, sparks and psychic energy mingling in a blaze of light and shadow. Horus's eyes widened briefly, just enough for Sanguinius to leave a wound, a single opening in the chaos, a gift of hope for the Emperor to claim. In that instant, the Primarch's strength failed, and he fell, the weight of prophecy and destiny pressing him down. His body struck the deck, wings collapsing around him. Yet his eyes remained fixed on his brother, on the galaxy, on the hope he had preserved with his sacrifice. Horror and sorrow mingled as life slipped away. Yet even in death, his courage shone like a beacon. As Sanguinius's life faded, the psychic echoes of his presence rippled across the battlefield of the vengeful spirit. The Emperor, sensing the Primarch's final act, rose to confront Horus with renewed purpose. The wound left by Sanguinius became the turning point, a narrow corridor through which hope could flow amidst the ocean of despair. The Blood Angels, mourning yet inspired, witnessed the ultimate sacrifice of their angelic Primarch, and the legend of Sanguinius, his bravery, and his tragedy became eternal. Horror lingered, grief pressed on every heart, yet the light of his actions endured, shaping the fate of the galaxy. Even as death claimed him, Sanguinius remained a figure of awe and inspiration. His wings, tattered but magnificent, spread across the deck like a final testament to the beauty, grace, and courage that defined him. The shadows of the vengeful spirit whispered of horror, chaos, and betrayal. Yet the echo of the angel's heart resonated through all who survived. Though his body fell, his soul, courage, and sacrifice endured, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire humanity, his sons, and the Emperor to rise against the darkness that sought to consume all. Sanguinius's final act became both tragedy and salvation, horror and hope entwined in a single, indelible moment of heroism. The battlefield of the vengeful spirit fell silent in the aftermath, a graveyard of shattered dreams, torn armor, and flickering flames. The galaxy itself seemed to mourn the loss of the angelic Primarch. Its stars dimmed, as though reflecting the sorrow that echoed through every loyal heart. Blood angels, their eyes wide with grief and awe, knelt beside the broken form of Sanguinius, wings collapsed, armor scarred, and body heavy with the cost of sacrifice. Silence hung over them, broken only by whispered prayers and the soft hiss of distant fires. Horror and grief mingled with a profound sense of reverence, a recognition that the greatest among them had given all to protect humanity from the abyss of chaos. The Emperor arrived, his presence filling the void with a radiance that seemed both comforting and heartbreaking. He knelt beside his fallen son, eyes reflecting pride, sorrow, and the weight of a galaxy resting upon him. "Even in death, you have saved humanity," he whispered, voice carrying across the devastated decks, strong yet tender, echoing through the hearts of all who listened. Sanguinius's sacrifice had not been in vain. The wound he inflicted upon Horus offered the Emperor a chance to act, to tip the scales of fate, and to preserve hope in a universe teetering on the edge of annihilation. The horror of loss was absolute, yet amidst it, the enduring flame of courage and love shone brighter than the stars themselves. The blood angels rose slowly, wings folded in solemn respect, eyes glistening with tears, yet burning with a new resolve. Their Primarch's death had imprinted upon them an eternal reminder of duty, honor, and the price of courage. The echoes of the black rage stirred within some, but the memory of Sanguinius's unwavering grace and sacrifice steadied them. Horror had walked among them and left its mark, yet from that horror came resilience, unity, and the profound understanding that even in the face of unimaginable loss, the light of their angelic Primarch would guide them. Their mourning was deep, yet intertwined with the spark of inspiration that would define their future for millennia. As the Emperor lifted Sanguinius's body, preparing to return him to the light of Terra, the vengeful spirit seemed to mourn in silence. The corridors that had witnessed betrayal, carnage, and ultimate sacrifice were now hallowed in the presence of the fallen angel. Every warrior, every soul touched by the Primarch's courage felt the echo of his life, the resonance of his heart, and the enduring lesson of his deeds. Horror lingered in memory, grief pressed upon every heart. Yet hope remained, a fragile yet unyielding thread woven by the hands of a son, a leader, and an angel who had embraced destiny with unparalleled courage. Sanguinius's legacy endured, eternal and luminous, a beacon amidst the darkness. The blood angels knelt, wings outstretched in homage, while the galaxy remembered the angelic Primarch not merely as a warrior, but as a symbol of sacrifice, love, and the profound courage required to stand against the relentless tide of chaos. Horror and sorrow would echo forever, yet in that echo resided inspiration, heroism, and the eternal truth that even in death, an angel could save humanity, leaving behind a story to be told across the stars, eternal, unbroken, and luminous as the light that bore him.